So Shabbat Shalom, everybody. For those of you who don't recognize me, I'm Rabbi Frank Tamburello. I am the rabbi at our Westchester Humanistic Community, and I'm helping Rabbi Tzemach out in the city as well for during his sabbatical leave. So I would like to start with Rebecca and a musical selection.
Yeah, I'm sharing. I'm sharing now, and you should be able to see it.
Great. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And we'll get started. Shalom Aleichem, Ohavei HaShabbat, Ohavei Shabbat Shalom. Welcome and treasure things that bring us pleasure, for now our work week is done. Turn from daily earning, take some time for learning, use this day for friends and family. Shabbat binds us, serves us, and reminds us of the values we shared through history. Shalom Aleichem, Ohavei HaShabbat, Ohavei Shabbat Shalom. Join us and sing out, let each Shabbat bring about strength from all that we've known. Turn from daily earning, take some time for learning, use this day for friends and family. Shabbat binds us, serves us, and reminds us of the values we shared through history.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. We'll continue with our welcome. Paul is going to welcome us on page 4, number 2, and Paula will help us out with our welcome.
Number 2. Yes, this is it.
Okay, I'm waiting.
Sorry, Paula.
That's okay. That's okay. All right. This one we gather on this Shabbat?
Yes.
Okay. We gather on this Shabbat as a community of believers. We believe that Judaism is the entire experience of the Jewish people. We believe in the value of celebrating Jewish culture and identity. We believe that all those who choose to celebrate with us are part of our community. We believe that being together strengthens and enhances our humanistic Jewish experience. May the Sabbath be a time of peace and rejuvenation. This is a time of transition. We move from our everyday week to the experience of Shabbat. We turn from the concerns of the outside world and become quiet and peaceful. We, at this moment, in this time, create a community of humanistic Jewish believers. Let us pause and take note as we begin the journey of this Shabbat.
Thank you. And so let's continue now with our candle lighting. So if we have our candles, we can light them. We renew ourselves for the week ahead so that we will have strength for ourselves, our families, and our part in making the world a better place. We kindle the lights of Shabbat as symbols of human enlightenment and human compassion to celebrate our coming together. To illuminate our lives and the warmth we find in our community, we remember the generations before us who lit candles as we do and found beauty and serenity in their light. So let's say the blessing all together. Na'eh ha'or ba'olam, Na'eh ha'or ba'adam, Na'eh ha'or ba'shabbat, Nokir et or ha'shabbat. How wonderful is the light in the world. How wonderful is the light within humanity. How wonderful is the light of Shabbat, and we cherish the light of Shabbat.
Na'eh ha'or ba'olam, Na'eh ha'or ba'adam, Na'eh ha'or ba'shabbat, Nokir et or ha'shabbat. Eifo libi, eifo tikvati mi, is my strength? My strength is in me and in you and in you. Where is my strength? My strength is in me and in you and in you.
You're muted, Frank. I'll unmute you, or you have to unmute yourself. I can't do it.
Okay. I'm sure there are people who would prefer me to stay muted, who knows? So on page, the values of secular Judaism, number 2, and Shirley is going to help us out with that.
Judaism is far more than many people allow it to be. Some people view it very narrowly, seeing only its religious side. Others perceive it broadly, emphasizing its ethical outreach. Judaism is more than theology and moral rules. It is more than parochial faith and universal sentiments. It is the living culture of a living people. Judaism is family, love, and nurturing. Judaism is memory, roots, and pride. Judaism is music, dance, and humor. Everything that Jewish people throughout the ages did and yearned to do is Judaism. Judaism did not fall from heaven. It was not invented by a divine spokesman. It was created by the Jewish people. It was molded by Jewish experience. It was flavored by Jewish sadness and Jewish joy. Life is an evolution, a continuous flow of transformations, and so is culture. When circumstances change, people change. When people change, their laws and customs change. A healthy people welcomes change. It understands its history. It knows its own power. It leads the past into the future. Secular humanistic Jews affirm the power of people. We affirm the power of common sense and human reason. But above all, we strive for human dignity. Human dignity is Jewish dignity. Rabbi Shuren Wein.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Continuing on with this song, Hine Ma Tov, it's song number 13.
הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד.
Thank you. Thanks, Rebecca. So we are coming to part of our service where we share our joys, concerns, and sorrows. And we're in a period where there is a lot to share and there are a lot of concerns. So we'll open this up, and I think Susan will help us out, and Shauna with the...
I'm going to ask if you can use the raise hand function. Please do that. It should be in the row of stuff at the bottom of the screen. It's easier for me to see because we're on more than one page, but we don't have so many people that I can't see you. So wave frantically if you don't know how to use the raise hand, but try to use the raise hand if you have something you want to share. Does anybody have anything? If not, I do. I'll start. Okay, I'll start. So on Wednesday, I'm leaving to go to Kinsale, Ireland, in the south of Ireland, for a new festival. Those of you who've known me for a while know that the other thing that I do in my life is I'm on staff at the annual Fest for Beatles fans in New York City and Chicago. That's the conventions for fans. There's a new convention happening in Kinsale, the Kinsale Beatles Festival, and they were looking for somebody to help them out with moderating panels and doing other things. And I got a good airfare, so I'm going to Ireland for the very first time, and I'm very excited about it. So that's my happy news. Peter, yes? You're muted.
I have three happy things. One, my niece's daughter celebrated her first birthday on Saturday, whether she knows it or not. And in other family news, one nephew is getting married next week after 14 years with the same woman. Finally, he figured it out, like in Guys and Dolls. He had a telegram, my mother, 14 years. If you know your Guys and Dolls, you'll get the joke. The second thing, and that's a niece is also just been engaged on my sister, one of my sister's daughters. So there's hopefully 2025 has a lot of joy to offer our family, and I'm hopeful for everybody else in the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? We don't have that much today. All right. It's okay if we don't have not a lot, but
Okay.
Dahlia, were you waving your hand?
Oh, I have something.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
On Martin Luther King Day, I went to a JCC to make packets for hygiene packets for the immigrants, and it was through Repair the World. So it's a Jewish organization, and I recommend everyone check it out to do more. And it was very satisfying, and I felt, very rewarded doing that. And we talked to other people, and what their feelings were about the day. So it was very worthwhile. It's called Repair the World. So check it out to do more.
Thank you, Lisa. Max, you had your hand up?
Oh yeah. Next Friday, so a week from today, I'm participating in a developmental reading of a new play, which is fascinating. It's I don't know if you guys know the author Norman Mana or Manea, depending on how you pronounce it. He's a Romanian author, and he, as a child, survived the concentration camps and was around for Romania's fall to communism. And he got out and made it to the States, and then returned to Romania. And it's a fascinating story. And it's going to be at the Romanian Cultural Institute next Friday night, if anybody wants to check it out.
Okay.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you. That's great.
Dahlia, did I see your hand up before or no? No? Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay, so I'm going to start sharing the screen again. And we will move on to the next thing, which is on page. Okay. The
Yeah,
last
20
quote, Frank.
Yeah, 24. And it's Clara is going to read our inspirational thoughts.
Clara, you might be muted. I can't hear you. So.
No, I just unmuted. I
Oh,
was
okay,
just wondering whether I start with heroes
No, start with
or just
the one, the
bottom.
last one.
Yeah.
We're going to discuss it. That
Yeah.
one.
The world keeps changing, and we American Jews have now risen to levels of affluence and influence that our grandparents and great-grandparents could never have imagined. With affluence and influence comes responsibility.
Thank you. So we,
Do you want me to stop sharing in case people have comments, Frank?
yes, if we have some comments, that would be great.
That'd be great. So I guess we can discuss this quote.
Could you put it back on the screen?
Yeah. I won't be able to see people raising their hands, though. It's the
Okay.
last one on the bottom, this one by Ruth Messenger, or my mouse is moving. If anybody has comments about it, I guess, or Frank can start us off.
I don't know. She muted you. She can't.
Does anybody want to,
Yeah,
Paula, did you? No, because you were unmuted, so.
Midi.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just wanted to say I wanted to applaud the writers of what we're reading. Ruth Messenger is quite an unusual choice. I didn't quite expect to see her, and obviously a very insightful person, and I've always had great respect for her. And I think it's great that we got a chance to read her words.
mm,
Anybody else have, I'm gonna stop the share because I can't see
Mhm.
if people are raising their hands. Yes, Devira, you have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something about Ruth also. She has been responsible for so many years for mentoring young women who have gone on to do incredible work, mostly in the Jewish community. She mentored Lanny Santo, who is the executive director of Footsteps
Mhm.
organization. She was the mentor for Audrey Sassoon, who is the executive director of an organization called JFREJ, Jews for
Social and
social
economic
for
justice.
racial.
Racial and economic justice.
And she was the mentor for Becca Dickstein, who was for many years a development person, the head of development for Footsteps, and then went on to be a development person for CARE. So she's done great work, and I know there are many more people, but those are the ones who I personally know.
Yeah, well, Dahlia had her
Also-
hand up, and then Paula will call on you after. I'm sorry, I saw Dahlia first. Go ahead, Dahlia.
Yeah, so I can always often be counted on to talk about the provocative things. I think that is a really important thing for us to remember. In a time of rising anti-Semitism, I think many of us hearken back to the history of Jews and of being vulnerable and so on. And I think, we have to remember that we are actually well-off and powerful people by and large in society now, and integrate that and remember that. Both in our actions and our respond to things, as well as, for our own perspective.
Thank you, Dahlia. Devira, did I see you raise your hand again? I know that Paula wanted to say something. So Paula, then Carol. Devira, you didn't have anything else? Okay. Paula,
Yeah,
and then Carol.
just continuing what Devira said about Ruth Messenger, she also headed the American Jewish World Service for many years. And an organization, an international organization that helped people all over the world, not necessarily Jewish at all. And in fact, a number of years ago, we did contribute to financially to them. For a couple of years, we did that. And it still exists and is a very worthwhile organization.
Thank you, Paula. Carol, you have to unmute. You're still muted, Carol. Nope, we still can't hear you, and I can't unmute you, unfortunately. No, you're still muted. You keep shutting your camera and not not turning on the microphone. There you go.
Okay. I think we do, I believe, or I feel that we have a special responsibility as Jews, as humanistic Jews, to do whatever we can. And Lisa mentioned something we could join, but there are many possibilities now for giving our time and giving our money to act, to try to stem this tide that's coming in like a tsunami over our country. So that's, in that sense, Ruth Messenger may be a beacon for us to follow and do the best we can, whatever we can do. Write letters, just have to keep on keeping on.
Thank you, Carol. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we don't have a lot of time tonight, so we have to move on to the next part of our service. So I'm going to start sharing the screen again. And once I find it, hello, it's here someplace. And then we will go to
next set.
actually, I don't have to share now. It's the Devar Torah now, right?
Yes, yes.
Sorry.
Am I unmuted?
No, you're not. You're good.
Okay, so one quick thing, I wanted to actually a shout out to Devera and Ruth Messenger and Lonnie Santo. I did work with the Footsteps organization for several years. I tutored them in English. It was kind of interesting because so many of them couldn't actually read or write English. So that organization holds a special place in my heart. And so I think we can continue with Mitty is going to do a little Devar Torah for us.
Mitty, you're muted.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
Shabbat Shalom, and thank you, Rabbi Varela. I'd like to begin by pointing out that for the sake of continuity, the secular Devar that I will be discussing is the one that normally is scheduled for last week, according to the traditional Jewish calendar. The text is the Parsha Shemot, which translates as names, and is from the opening section of the book of Exodus. What particularly struck me about it was the part in which the Egyptian Pharaoh complains that the Israelites have been doing far too good a job of fruitfully multiplying. Here's verse 9. And he said to his people, "Look, the Israelite people are much too numerous for us." To put his words another way, there are too many people among us who are not enough like us. The Pharaoh, of course, sees that as a problem. Sound familiar? It's the same message we've been hearing from conservatives for the last 8 years, and as of this past Monday, proactive measures addressing this concern may be imminently taken, if not already. To his credit, the Pharaoh's strategy was actually more benevolent than the plans of our new leadership is contemplating. All he wanted to do was oppress the Israelites. From verse 13. The Egyptians made life bitter for them with harsh labor at mortar and bricks and with all sorts of tasks in the field. In his case, the Pharaoh was at least okay with allowing the Israelites to work, and he certainly wasn't intending to arrest anyone. So what we currently have is a situation in which our political leaders now compare unfavorably to the biblical Pharaoh of Egypt. And if the plans for mass deportation are carried out, that comparison can prove to be extremely unfavorable. Even more troubling is the possibility that the new administration may not limit itself to the oppression of immigrants. Donald Trump has regularly shown himself to be both deeply racist and utterly opposed to the fundamental rights of women. Now, as we know, the Pharaoh eventually paid a heavy price in the form of the 10 plagues for his treatment of the Israelites. My personal favorite plague is the frogs. This from verse 28. The Nile shall swarm with frogs, and they shall come up and enter your palace, your bedchamber, and your bed, and your ovens, and your kneading bowls. As for me, the thought of seeing the look on Donald Trump's face when he opens his oven door and a flurry of frogs emerge and scamper all over him, what can I say? Just warms my heart. Another pertinent point is that Trump has quite a few presidential predecessors who actually valued the contributions of immigrants. The immigration law that we now have, outdated though it may be, actually welcomes many people who have skills that will contribute to our nation's well-being. And only the staunchest of conservatives would deny the beneficial results of the landmark immigration bill signed by Lyndon Johnson that opened up immigration to many countries that had long been denied that opportunity. And there is a parallel in Exodus there as well. Verse 10 states that the Pharaoh was new to his position and did not know about the contribution of Joseph, the Israelite who earlier saved Egypt from famine by interpreting the previous Pharaoh's dream as a warning to store up provisions in the event of hard times. Donald Trump is clearly just as clueless about the past as the new Pharaoh was. So what can we do to punish the conservatives short of calling for a new set of plagues? One way is to vote them out of Congress in the coming midterm elections, and we shouldn't waste any time in working toward that goal. The other thing I intend to do is to continue doing my very small part to make the lives of our newest immigrants at least a little less oppressive. For the past couple of years, Paul and I have volunteered with an organization in Brooklyn called Ruth's Refuge that delivers free furniture to people who are restarting their lives in their first homes in America. We've helped out Venezuelans, Ukrainians, and Afghanis, among others, and the gratitude that we've received is almost beyond measure. Getting back to the book of Exodus, I'd like to conclude by saying that it is, of course, only a metaphor, but one that is, sadly, all too apt for the times we find ourselves living in. Please join us at the next Shabbat, when the Secular Devar presenter will delve further into the book of Exodus. Shabbat Shalom, and now back to Rabbi Tamburello.
Thank you.
I'm going to share again and we'll go on. So
Yeah. Mitty, thank you for those thoughts. Thank you. They speak to all of us. So now we will continue with Rebecca, right? We're going to sing the Tzaddik Tamar on number 23.
Yes. Tzaddik Tamar yifrach, yifrach, Tzaddik Tamar yifrach, Tzaddik Tamar yifrach, yifrach, Tzaddik Tamar yifrach, ke'eles bavanon yizke, ke'eles bavanon yizke, ke'eles bavanon yizke, yizke, ke'eles bavanon yizke, ke'eles bavanon yizke, ke'eles bavanon yizke, yizke.
bottom part. Okay. Frank, you're muted. No, you're not.
Great. So continue with our second reading. Barbara will read for us. Page 27, our families.
Our congregation seeks to expand our understanding and make space for everyone. As the Jewish community grows in its awareness that Jewish families come in varied configurations, including intercultural and interracial families, so too may our institutions grow and be open to the diversity of families today. With so much emphasis on traditional families, unmarried adults often feel sidelined in Jewish communal life. As more adults remain single, let us be clear that they are a welcome, integral part of our humanistic Jewish community.
Thank you. So we are continuing with the important section of our service for those in need. In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we now turn our minds and hearts toward those who need our love, who are ill, who are lonely, who suffer pain, or who have been wronged. So at this point, I will open up for
Stop the sharing.
to start the sharing.
Okay. If you have a hand to raise or use the raise hand function. Carol, then Dahlia and Howard, then I have something too. So Carol, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay. My friend Fred Rogenstein, he fell and really smashed his hip, and he's in rehab now, and it's going to take a while to recover.
Thank you. Dahlia and Howard?
We
I-
misunderstood.
We thought it was
Oh,
your
okay.
yard site, sorry.
All right. So I have something, and then if anybody else does, I got word today that my friend Renee, one of the lovely ladies I play mahjong with, was alone in her apartment, and she's okay. Well, sort of. She's in the hospital with pneumonia, and they didn't know that she had fallen out of bed for about a day and a half. So they did find her. But she's in the hospital, and I'm worried about her. So I want to think good thoughts for her. Shauna, is that you with your hand up?
Yeah.
It's me. Hi.
Yeah.
I just want to send good wishes to my friend Izzy. She is 38 and she will be starting chemo for breast cancer on Tuesday.
Thank you, Shauna. Judith?
My friend Robert is recuperating from multiple surgeries, and he's always in my thoughts.
Thank you. Shauna, you had your hand up again or no?
Nope.
Oh, okay. All right. And Judith, yeah, all right. Judith already said. Anybody else have anybody they want to, that they're thinking about today? Max? And then Devira and Michael. I saw Max first. Sorry.
I know a number of people who live in Los Angeles who have had to flee their homes and haven't been back yet, and some don't know what they have left. And I'm thinking about them.
Before we move on to Michael and Devira, Hope, who is visiting us today, said that her cousin Robert died a couple of weeks ago, so she's thinking. Devira and Michael, you can unmute.
Yeah, I want to mention my friend Stephen Foster, who's suffering with lung cancer and on his way out.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else? No? Okay, I'm going to start sharing again. Okay. All right.
מקום הכוח בתוכנו, מקורות הברכה בחברותינו. May the source of strength that dwells so deep within us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Shalom. Makom hakoach בתוכנו, מקורות הברכה בחברותינו. May those in need of healing know refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Shalom.
Frank, you need to unmute.
So we continue with our memorial section Let us proclaim the preciousness of life. Let us show gratitude for life by approaching it with reverence. Let us embrace the whole world even as we wrestle with its parts. Let us, each in our own way, take up our share in serving the world and seeking truth. May our commitment to life help us to strengthen healing of spirit and peace of mind in ourselves and others. And let us say, Lu Yihi, may it be so. So at this time, any names we want to mention for memorial?
Peter, and then Dahlia and Howard.
I'd like to recognize from myself and my family the 8th yard site for my father, Dr. Robert Moniz, on the 31st of January, 2017.
Thank you, Peter. Dahlia and Howard, and then Kathy, and then Lisa.
My sister Judy, who passed away earlier in the year, as many of you know, and my mother, who like 25 years ago, or 21 years ago, passed away in December.
Thank you, Howard. Kathy, and then Lisa.
So next Thursday, the 30th, is my brother's 5th secular yard site. I miss him very much.
Thank you, Kathy. Lisa?
I'd like to mention Cecile Richards. She passed away recently. She contributed a lot to society. I met her in 2022 on the Nation cruise, and I'm very sad, and I wish her family healing.
Thank you.
Julian? You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah, on February 6th, it's going to be my mom's 2nd yard site. I miss her, but many of you know, her politics were rather atrocious. So I'm almost, I miss her, but I'm also relieved that we don't have to have conversations about politics these days. But I miss her. So that's the truth.
Anybody else? No? Okay, I'll start sharing again. One second. Okay.
Okay.
זכר צדיק לברכה, זכר צדיק לברכה. With our tears and our sorrow, we remember. זכר צדיק לברכה. With our courage and our strength, we do not forget. Acts of kindness, deeds of courage will remain. Death cannot take that which is locked in our hearts. Zecher Tzadik Livracha.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thank you. We will continue with our Kiddush on page 32, 33. Michael Whitkin will lead us with the wine.
We celebrate the fruit of the vine and nature's gifts. As we bend nature to our pleasure, we also think about our duties as caretakers of this planet. We dedicate this wine to the joy of Shabbat and to the lives of generations past and generations to come, and to the planet that sustains us. Let us say together, Na'ayim ha'chaim ba'olam, Na'ayim ha'chaim
Manu,
Na'im megale pri hagafen l'chaim. We celebrate the life within the world. We celebrate the life within us. We cherish those who grow and tend the fruit of the vine, l'chaim, to life.
נעים החיים בעולם, נעים החיים בנו, נעים מגלי פרי הגפן לחיים.
And we will continue with a challah, and Mark will help us out with that.
Breaking bread together is an ancient custom in many cultures. It signifies sharing, fellowship, and coming together in peace. We reenact this ritual together as a sign of our common humanity, our care for one another, and for those less fortunate than ourselves. Let us say together, Na'eh matanat hamazon, Na'eh amal kapenu, Na'eh lechem haaretz avon. How wonderful is the gift of food. How wonderful is the work of our hands. How wonderful is the bread of the earth. We cherish those who bring forth bread from the earth.
נאה מתנת המזון, נאה המקפנו, נאה לחם הארץ, בתיאבון.
I'm going to stop the share, Frank, because I guess you're going to talk to us a little.
Yeah, as soon as I swallow the challah. Okay. In just a few minutes, we will hear our SHJ Executive Director, Paul Golan, speak to us on the rise of Christian nationalism. This issue not only affects Jews and other vulnerable minorities, but all of us. I feel that it is important to acknowledge and cherish those in our lives, families, and communities who are not Jewish, but who stand strong with us in the face of anti-Semitism and injustice. My husband is not Jewish. And the other day we were having a discussion with one of our friends, and he said something to her. She's not Jewish either, and she's a Christian and one of our dearest friends. And we were talking about all of the storm coming up, and he said, "We are gay and Jewish." He wasn't Jewish, but he said, "We are gay and Jewish." And that really, it moved me so much that he would actually identify with us in that way. So here are a few thoughts by Rabbi Karen Aviv. She's a rabbinic director at an organization called Judaism Your Way. And the words are like this: gratitude and appreciation for our beloved allies. Just a little poem. We welcome and appreciate all our loved ones and allies who share in building Jewish life together. Thank you for loving Jewish people as partners, family members, and friends. Thank you for standing by Jewish people, especially when we feel scared and anxious about our safety, belonging, and enoughness in this country. Thank you for putting up with the challenging patterns we inherited from our ancestors. We know it can feel confusing and frustrating sometimes. Thank you for walking with us to raise children with Jewish culture in a world that's not always easy. We see you. We value your presence. We appreciate the gifts you bring to our families and communities, and may you feel blessed in our space.
Thank you, Rabbi Frank.
Thank you.
I'm going to share again. Just 1 second. Jumping all over the place on my computer here. Okay, I'm going to go on to this page.
And Carol, concluding thoughts.
Okay. I
You're
got
good.
it.
Can you see it?
Yeah. Um, each of us here is, each of us is here for a temporary stay on Earth. For what purpose, I don't know. But it is plain that we exist for our fellow humans. In the first place, for those upon whose smiles and welfare our happiness depends. And the next, for those unknown to us personally, but to whose destinies we are bound by the tie of sympathy. 100 times a day, I remind myself that my inner and outer life depends on the labor of others, living and dead, that I must exert myself in order to give in the measure as I have received, and I'm still receiving.
נעשה שלום בעולם, נעשה שלום עלינו, לעכל העולם, ואמרו שלום, נעשה שלום בעולם, נעשה שלום עלינו, לעכל העולם, ואמרו שלום.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca. It was beautiful. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Susan and Shauna and Kathy and everyone who helped make this service this beautiful today. And so I'm going to hand it over to Susan for our news, and then to Paul.
Actually, I'm going to hand it over to Kathy. So Kathy, take it away.
Take it away, Kathy.
So I lost my notes, but I think you already know that we have the rabbis classes that are continuing. There is the Talmud or the Bible through a secular lens, which would be on I believe it's Tuesday and Thursday mornings at 10:30. There is every other Wednesday evening at 7:30, Judaism for Beginners. And we have the continued Monday evening at 7 o'clock Talmud class. We have our weekly Zoom schmooze on Wednesday evenings from 8 to 10, which is open to everyone. We have our monthly Zoom grief support group at 7 to 9, which is also open to everyone. It can be all types of grief, whatever you're feeling, come and share. We have 2 Shabbats in February, one on the 7th and one on the 28th. The 7th will be online. The 28th, I cannot remember if it's online or in person. I'm so sorry.
It's going to be in person, and it's Jewish music and anti-Semitism. The next Shabbat is going to be Rabbi Jody Kornfeld from Chicago talking about the new book that she and Rabbi Adam Shalom edited. The title is escaping me. I'm completely, but anyway, they're going to be, the reason that it's online is because she's in Chicago. She can't come here. So she's going to be talking to us about the book. It's on the website as well. Exactly.
Susan, did you just say that the one about Judaism and music and anti-Semitism will be in person?
It will be in person, yes.
Okay, because I got the wrong information, and I just told the speaker that it's going to be online.
Oh,
but I'm sure
it's in person on the website. We have to fix this on the website. I heard it was.
You know what, Shirley, we'll talk about it later.
Yeah, let's talk about it after the program.
Our last piece is that Kids School is on February 9th, and we also have a potential adult perspectives on February 9th at 3:30. So for that, it will be in the newsletter if it comes to fruition.
And the other thing is that this Sunday is the Kids School Day of Action. in honor of Martin Luther King Day. So our kids will be getting together and doing some social action activities on Sunday in lieu of regular kids' school classes. As thank you, the title of the book escaped me, and the book is Contemporary Humanistic Judaism, Beliefs, Values, and Practices. That's the book that Rabbi Cody and Rabbi Adam edited, and I should have written that down on my notes, but I didn't. Now I guess we're gonna, Frank, if you want to give Paul an introduction, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. So Paul Golan, welcome to our city congregation, and we are looking forward to hearing what you have to tell us about the rise of Christian nationalism. As you know, my background itself kind of touches on this issue, coming from this Christian background myself. So it's going to be very interesting for me to hear what you have to say to us and for us to learn. So I'm going to hand it over to you now, Paul.
Great, thank you. Thanks everybody for that lovely service and welcome. And for those of you who may not know, although I think everyone does, but I always want to acknowledge that there may be some newcomers. The Society for Humanistic Judaism is the umbrella organization for congregations like City Congregation in New York. There's about 32 groups. Some are very small, some are large with rabbis, some don't have rabbis, throughout the US and Toronto. So that makes this international. We actually also have independent members of the Society for Humanistic Judaism. And until you blew up my frame, I didn't realize that you can see my luggage in the corner there. I'm visiting friends in, no, you can keep me blown up. Visiting friends in Florida, trying to get a little warmth, not succeeding, like 50 degrees down here, but still better than the 14 that I left in New York. So as the organizing body for humanistic Judaism in the US, when I came on, I asked, what kind of social justice do we do as a movement? Because that's how many secular Jews engage with their Jewish identity. And there wasn't a specific program. So we launched a little over 5 years ago, Jews for a Secular Democracy. And this is not just for humanistic Jews. We felt like these were issues that we were going to address that are relevant and should speak on behalf of all Jews. So this is a pluralistic initiative around bringing Jewish perspective to separation of church and state. So today I'm going to speak about white Christian nationalism. And I've done a lot of presenting on Jews for Secular Democracy and what our overall goals are, but this will be my first time presenting specifically on white Christian nationalism. So I created a PowerPoint that I'm going to share. I didn't time this out. It could be 30 minutes. It could be 3 minutes. We're going to find out. It won't be 3 minutes, but it will probably be somewhere around 30 minutes. And so a little bit of background about Jews for a Secular Democracy. The mission is to mobilize Jewish voices for religious freedom. Through education and advocacy and informed by pluralistic Jewish values and traditions, we defend the separation of religion and government. And some of the big issues that we see related to religious encroachment on what should be a secular democracy are reproductive rights and women's equality, LGBTQ equality, secular education. We're going to talk a bit about prayer in school, in public schools, etc., and religious pluralism, right? The rights for everybody, whether religious or secular, to be able to express their identity as they wish, regardless, as long as it doesn't impact on other people. And so in always talking about this, we sometimes talk about who it's being defended from, but this presentation is going to very specifically dive much deeper into what we mean by white Christian nationalism. And by the way, there will be lots of time at the end for Q&A. So if something comes up, put it in the chat. I can't see it right now because it's PowerPoint, but I will look at it after or write it down and remember it, and we'll have a conversation. But I wanted to kind of throw all the info at you up front, and then we can talk about it. So there are a variety of definitions of white Christian nationalism. I pulled out a couple. This one is from Christians Against Christian Nationalism, which is a great organization. And in its name itself, you can see that Christian nationalism is not a blanket statement for all Christians. And in fact, it is not even necessarily the majority of Christians. And that's an important point to keep in mind. So their definition of white Christian nationalism is it's a cultural framework that idealizes and advocates a fusion of Christianity with American civic life. Christian nationalism contends that America has been and should always be distinctively Christian from top to bottom in its self-identity, interpretation of its own history, sacred symbols, cherished values, and public policy. Another definition or explanation is by the author, Dr. Jemar Tisby, who writes, and it's an ethnocultural ideology that uses Christian symbolism to create a permission structure for the acquisition of political power and social control. I think that's really important to keep in mind as well. We're not talking about a religion here. We're talking about a political ideology and a power play, really. So some of the key aspects of white Christian nationalism, and, you know, I guess trigger alert, too late. This is a photo from the insurrection. This guy inevitably has been pardoned, but there were a lot of Christian symbolism at this insurrection, and many of the leaders and people involved were Christian nationalists. So the base for this movement and its leaders are primarily white evangelical Protestants. The history of it, which I'll touch on in the next slide, is more about race than religion, and I'll get into that. And it's certainly, as I said, more about politics than religion. Something you may or may not have heard of is this idea of dominionism, that Christians should be at the top of 7 mountains of society. It calls for believers to take control over 7 leading aspects of culture, which are family, religion, education, media, entertainment, business, and government. And they want to control all these aspects. And white Christian nationalism has always been a hyper-masculine, militaristic version of Christianity. There's lots of other things intertwined. This prosperity gospel, that if you are a billionaire, it's because God has shined favor on you, that people get what they deserve. And if you are prosperous, that's because God favors you, etc. It's important to note that there is white nationalism as well as Christian nationalism, and those are somewhat different, but the end goals are kind of the same. So white nationalists are the Klan, right? The people who will say the white race is superior, and they'll be upfront with it, and they'll throw the Nazi salute, and they are very easy to identify, whereas Christian nationalism is much more coded, and they will kind of obfuscate their ultimate, I think, racist and search for power over everybody else in code, and try to seem diverse. Like, for example, regularly using the phrase Judeo-Christian, right? I think there are still today many Jews who feel like when they hear that phrase, the Judeo-Christian tradition, or we need, as Americans, have Judeo-Christian values, that is inclusive of us Jews, but it's not. And we can talk a bit more about that, but it is cover for their, what many other Christians consider distorted views on women, on reproductive rights, on when life begins, and so on. And the movement is inherently anti-democratic, which is also why I have this picture from the insurrection, because they know they are the minority as far as their viewpoint, and they don't care. They want to rule by minority, so they are going to suppress the vote and try to prevent the diverse and pluralistic American electorate from truly expressing what it wants. I want to point you to a webinar that is up on our YouTube channel that we did with Dr. Bradley Onishi, who wrote a great book, Preparing for War, The Extremist History of White Christian Nationalism. He does a great job explaining how this all emerged. So again, white power, white nationalism has always been with us. You can say it's America's original sin, right? Even before the founding of America, with slavery, with only people who could originally vote were white land holders and so on. And much of the history of America is everyone else fighting for their rights. And so when they talk about making America great again, I think a lot of them have in mind this time when only white Christian men genuinely had power. But Christian nationalism, where Christianity was used to express these ideas and goals, really accelerated, began in the late 19th, early 20th century when they wanted to close the mostly open borders from immigrants coming into the United States. I don't know if you have you may have a similar family history. One side of my family came to the US in the 1880s in that wave of Jewish migration fleeing pogroms in Russia. They were from Ukraine, the Pale of Settlement, where for the most part, millions came from there to the US because they were able to. The other half of my family, almost all of whom died in the Holocaust because they could no longer come to the US because of laws that were set up to prevent them because of this movement for white power, really. In the 40s and 50s, some people think "In God We Trust" has always been our national motto, has always been on our currency. I hope you know that that is not true and that it didn't start happening until we needed to counter the godless communists. And that was an opportunity for Christian nationalists to start putting God everywhere that they possibly could. But the real accelerant for what we are experiencing today with Christian nationalism was desegregation, right? So obviously, the South did lose the Civil War, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. And Reconstruction was a disaster, turned into a disaster. Segregation was the law of the land in the South. And once it was finally dismantled, whites began moving their kids out of public schools to avoid desegregation, and created Christian academies. And the government finally said, you will not be tax exempt if you keep these schools segregated. And that was kind of the kickoff of what is today's white Christian nationalist movement. So a lot of people think what really kicked it off was Roe v. Wade, but which made abortion legal. If you look at who was supporting Roe v. Wade when the Supreme Court made abortion legal, there were many, many churches that supported it, and then ultimately came to renege. The ideology of life beginning at conception was not a thing in the early 20th century. And so what happened was these white Christian nationalists recognized that it was not popular and not politically correct to say, we want segregation back, right? And again, this is the difference between white nationalism, who, the Klan is still fine saying that behind the secrecy of their white sheets. But Christian nationalists, they needed additional wedge issues. And so in the 80s, they recognized that abortion was a key wedge issue, along with other culture war issues like the gay rights movement, which accelerated in the 90s. So now they have successfully distanced themselves from the racism that really still underpins their movement, and they make it about abortion, they make it about LGBTQ. But I encourage you to go watch the interview with Dr. Onishi, who does a much better job explaining how this all came about and how racism really is the thing that underpins so much of the movement that we're experiencing today. And if you didn't know that, you probably still were already seeing it in how it manifests, but it becomes that much more powerful and more obvious. So I want to dive into some numbers around who and how many Americans are white Christian nationalists. And a great organization is called Public Religion Research Institute, PRRI. They did a survey of 22,000 Americans I think it was 2022, and the numbers were released in 2023. And they created a rubric whereby they used 5 questions, and based on how many of these you agree with, determines whether or not and what kind of Christian nationalist you might be. So these statements that people agreed or disagreed with are: God has called Christians to exercise dominion. Remember, there's that word again, dominionism, over all areas of American society. 20% of these Americans surveyed agreed with that. The U.S. government should declare America a Christian nation. 27% agreed. Being Christian is an important part of being truly American. 30% agreed. If the U.S. moves away from our Christian foundations, we will not have a country anymore. 38%. And U.S. law should be based on Christian values. It's 40%. And you'll note that none of these are over 50%. None of these are the majority. I'm trying to look for things to be hopeful about, and that is one piece of it. So then PRRI took the answers to these 5 questions and created 4 categories of Americans as far as how they relate to Christian nationalism. So folks who overwhelmingly agree or completely agree with all or 4 out of 5 of those, they call adherents. They adhere to Christian nationalism. Those who agree with many but not all, or are less likely, less strongly agree, are called sympathizers to Christian nationalism. And then those who disagree but not completely disagree are called skeptics. And then those who completely disagree are called rejectors. I'm hoping that everyone on this call is a rejector, but happy to hear from anybody else after we go to Q&A. But I thought this was an interesting way to break it down. Obviously, this is not a hard and fast factual thing, but I think it gives a really nice way of kind of understanding how do Americans relate to this ideology. And, I didn't do this. Okay. So how does this break down? 3 in 10 Americans qualify as either Christian nationalism adherents or sympathizers, right? Adherents are only 10%, right? The hardest hardcore white Christian nationalists, only 10% of Americans, and the folks who sympathize with them are another 20%. So that's a third of Americans, right? Nowhere close to a majority, compared to 2/3 of Americans who qualify as either skeptics or rejectors, right? There are as many rejectors combined as there are both adherents and sympathizers. To me, this kind of middle ground, the 39% who are skeptics, those are the folks we got to get to, right? And maybe some of the 19% who are sympathizers. We're not going to necessarily flip any of the adherents, but they're only 10%. Talk more about that as we go. And how about how this breaks down by religion? So, and I'm sorry if this is hard to see on your screen, so I'll just kind of note that at the very top are white evangelical Protestants. 29% of them are adherents of Christian nationalism, and another 35% are sympathizers. So the majority of white evangelical Protestants are white Christian nationalists, and of course, that is the base of the GOP and Trump today. And then under that, they break down Protestants of color. So you'll see a few lines below white is Black Protestants, and 14% of them are adherents to Christian nationalism, right? And this is often used by folks who say, well, how can it be white Christian nationalism if you've got 14% of Black Protestants and who are adherents and another 24% who are sympathizers? That is, you know, over a third of Black Protestants. But there is a difference in how they see Christianity and America, but it is certainly troubling and means that we have bridges to build and work to do. And then if you go all the way down to the bottom, you got Jewish, and you know, with surveys like this, even though they reach 22,000, it's often, unless you're specifically looking to survey Jews, it's really hard because Jews are only 2% of the US population to make definitive statements about Jews in these kind of surveys. That said, there are 2% of American Jews who are adherents to Christian nationalism and another 5% who are sympathizers. It's pretty low. But there's still, you know, 6 or 7% of them who think America should be a Christian country. I don't know if you know any Jews who would agree with that. I don't. And then under that is unaffiliated, which doesn't necessarily mean atheist agnostic, but they would fall into the unaffiliated. And it's even low, with only 1% who are adherents to Christian nationalism and 6% who are sympathizers. Getting back to that difference in race, they drill down on that and they ask questions about race. And so they ask, do you agree with or disagree with certain statements? So this first one is that generations of slavery and discrimination have created conditions that make it difficult for many Black Americans to work their way out of the lower class. Do you disagree with the statement, basically, that there is a legacy of slavery that impacts African Americans today? Of all Americans, 45% disagree with that statement, but among Christian nationalist adherents, 70% disagree with that statement. And then it goes down, and here's the difference, right? All adherents of Christian nationalism still have a majority, 70%, but of white adherents of Christian nationalism, it is 83% compared to 46% of Black adherents to Christian nationalists, right? So we're talking about the 10% of the most hardcore Christian nationalists, which are a very few number of African Americans who fall into that category. And of them, less than half would disagree with the statement that slavery has had an ongoing impact. But this is the difference between white Christian nationalism and the Black community, it's Black community and not all people of color, and what the difference is. So some of these other questions also drill down, and you can really see the difference between that third and fourth lines on all of these, that the white adherence to Christian nationalism really hold a lot of racist views. So the other questions are, today, discrimination against white Americans has become as big a problem as discrimination against Black Americans and other minorities. 85% of adherents to Christian nationalism agree with that ridiculous statement. A Black person is more likely to receive the death penalty for the same crime. 72% of Christian nationalists who are white disagree with that statement, only 46% who are Black, and so on. White supremacy is still a major problem in the US today. Do you disagree with that? Those who disagree with it, again, big discrepancy, 66% of white Christian nationalists disagree with the statement, white supremacy is still a major problem in the US today. Seems like a majority of Americans overall disagree with that, agree with the statement, white supremacy is still a major problem in the US today, right? Only 32% of all Americans disagree with that statement, which is encouraging. And now I know you want to break it down by political party, and I know that's going to be a big shock to you, but there are way more Christian nationalists who are Republicans than independent or Democrat. It doesn't mean there are no Christian nationalists as measured by the answers to those original 5 questions, right? 5% of Democrats are the hardcore adherents of Christian nationalism, and 10% are sympathizers. But compare that to 21% and 33% of Republicans, right? You've got more than half of Republicans who are white Christian nationalists by the definition of this survey. One of the issues we should think about is that many Americans have not even heard of Christian nationalism. And when we started Jews for a Secular Democracy, I did a search. You can use Google to search a website, and I searched the Jewish Forward website for the phrase Christian nationalism, and maybe 2 articles came up. You know, it was not written about in the Jewish media 6 years ago. And that's scary and disturbing. It's got a lot more coverage since then. And I think there was a discomfort among Jews and the Jewish community to name it because it has the word Christian in it. And we don't want to look like we're attacking our Christian neighbors, because again, this is a political ideology, not a religion, and it does not speak for all Christians, as we just saw with the reverend who gave the talk to our new president 2 days ago, right? So of all Americans, 37% have not heard or don't know or didn't want to answer questions about Christian nationalism. And even among adherents, 38% don't have a name, have not heard of it. But you can see that the green is, they feel that it's an unfavorable expression, and blue is that they feel it's a favorable expression. And those who reject or are skeptics, obviously, who know what the phrase means, are find it very unfavorable, right? 71% of the rejectors find the phrase Christian nationalism very unfavorable. So the folks who know it, who know what it is, know where they stand, but there's this huge middle group of folks who don't even know the phrase yet and can't define it. What is their issue, and why do we care? And again, I'll point you to another conversation that we had through Jews for Secular Democracy by somebody who can be much more articulate about this than me. We had a great conversation with Rabbi Jay Michelson, who, if you're not following him in social media, he really is a brilliant person who writes about all kinds of things related to Judaism and politics and what's going on in this country. So I really encourage you to watch that. He wrote a piece about Project 2025 last summer that really, and I hope you've all heard about Project 2025. It was a massive 800-something page document written by the Heritage Foundation, the ultra-conservative Christian nationalist organization, and a whole lot of allies that basically understood that the last time Trump got elected, they missed a tremendous opportunity because they thought there was no way he was going to win. And when he did win, they were just completely disorganized. So they felt like, let's have a plan going in on day one. And the reason why Trump just signed crazy number of executive orders over his first few days is because it was all mapped out already by these folks, these, you know, coalition of Christian nationalists to implement their agenda. And their agenda includes a lot of things that we're all going to be very upset about. But I listed just a few. Again, if you go read the article by Jay Michelson, he touches on some more, and we talk about it in the interview with him. But obviously, they want to end abortion, and they want to prosecute those who aid and abet it. They are going to have a chilling effect on abortion, not just in the states that have banned it, but across the country. They want to absolutely turn back progress on LGBTQ equality and end gay marriage. I would say, when people ask me who is on the front lines right now, I would put our trans friends and family as absolutely the front of the front line, and I'm terrified for them. Prayer in public, putting prayer in public schools and taking out money from public schools to put into religious schools, major part of their agenda. They are looking to replace so much of our federal government from professionalized individuals to their lackeys. And bottom line, they want to return white Christian men to the place of privilege that they had when this country was founded. That's all this anti-DEI talk and so on is really about. Like, nobody in this country has had more of an unfair leg up than white men. And, you know, yet when everyone else has at least attempted to get close to it, now this is the radical backlash that we're facing. So, and this just is tip of the iceberg. The document is massive, and there are so many things they're going to try to do, and they won't be successful on all of it, I hope, but there will be a lot of unfortunate turning back the clock on so many of the things that we've made progress on in this country over the last decade. I saw this meme and I thought it was relevant. You know, just don't worry. As long as you aren't LGBTQ or Black or Hispanic or Jewish or Muslim or Arab or Asian or atheist or disabled or female or poor, you're going to be fine. Right? Who does that leave? How about the Jews? So besides Project 2025, the same group put out a document called Project Esther, which if you haven't heard of it, you can Google it, and it's the top result. It's on the Heritage Foundation website. It is ridiculous. It is an attempt to fight anti-Semitism, ostensibly, by these white Christian nationalists, and it is awful. You know, they have a lot of very pro-Zionist views, which I think a lot of Jews feel good about and happy to have them as allies and feel like we have to take allies wherever we can. But I encourage folks who feel that way to dig deeper on what is really happening with their support of a very right-wing government in Israel, and why right-wingers all across the world are excited about what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing and what he's been enabled to do. And we already know how much Netanyahu has interjected in support of Trump the first term and during the election and so on. So there's a love affair there between far-right leaders, but it doesn't extend to actual American Jews, right? Who we remember Trump has said multiple times that we are disloyal, that he doesn't understand why we wouldn't vote for him, and so on. And a big part of it is just this racist, nationalistic idea that America is for white Christians and Israel is for the Jews. And so you got your own country, right? Trump said your prime minister to American Jews talking about Netanyahu. He's not my prime minister. So it's very scary what their philo-Semitism is, which is really anti-Semitism. And it's really important to understand that. And that perhaps is a whole other conversation. If you go to look at Project Esther on their website, first of all, the goal is clearly weaponize any anti-Israel expressions against the folks who do that, because of course it's almost all on the left, and so it's an opportunity to go after liberals. There is no mention of anti-Semitism on the right in this document at all, even though the actual violence against Jews in America has almost overwhelmingly come from people who've been radicalized by Christian nationalism. It's clear that the document was not written by Jews, because they bash Reform Judaism, but they call it Reformed Judaism, Reformed Jewish movement, they called it. And it's kind of a look, if you're not deeply involved in the Jewish community, it may feel natural to say it's Reformed Judaism. It's not Reformed. There's no ED at the end. It's just Reformed Judaism. It's good to know. And clearly there were no Jews involved, or no non-Orthodox Jews involved in the writing of this document. And they even in the document name George Soros's foundation and blame him for supporting Hamas, and which Soros does not, and name Bernie Sanders as part of what they call the Hamas caucus in Congress. It is such a political document. But this is the quote that really got to me. The American Jewish community has not demonstrated a unified resolve against the Hamas support network or its Hamas support organizations, right? That's what they're calling all of liberal, any anti-Israel activity at all. Like there's no distinction between what might be real anti-Semitism on the far left versus what might be a peace movement. And their program of Jew hatred and America hatred. Some may be blind, some Jews, right, may be blind and deaf to the manifestation of Hamas support network inspired anti-Semitism at home. Some may be in such disbelief that they cannot even acknowledge the threat. More likely, many simply do not know what to do and are waiting for leadership to guide them. In other words, we American Jews need their white Christian nationalism leadership to identify anti-Semitism. We can't identify anti-Semitism ourselves. It is a truly disturbing document that is now being potentially planned to be implemented by the folks who have come into power. So we have nothing to worry about because the only challenges we have to face is the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, which are all controlled by white Christian nationalists. I don't want to end there. We've been working, nevertheless, to try to change minds, win people over, make a difference. This is us with 3 of the Congress people that we've engaged in programming and conversation with. And coincidentally, they're all Democrats, but we'd be happy to have Republicans involved as well. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of political courage on that side of the aisle to actually step up and say this is wrong. And what we do is serve as an educational platform, again, pluralistically highlighting organizations, regardless of their Jewish denominations or even beyond the Jewish organized world. We are advocating around issues for inclusion and highlighting shared American values, including freedom and pluralism, which I still hold out hope that most Americans understand and want to see. And that's what we have to build on. So the last survey numbers that I'll share with you from PRRI is how we might be able to sway the skeptics or flip the sympathizers. Still today, of all Americans, 73% say that they would prefer the U.S. to be a nation made up of people belonging to a wide variety of religions. 73% of Americans, we can hang on to that and see hope in that. Likewise, only 27% say that they would prefer the U.S. to be a nation primarily made up of people who follow the Christian faith. Of course, among adherents, it's flipped, right? Adherents of Christian nationalism completely flip on that. And so do sympathizers. It's much more even of sympathizers, and even among the sympathizers of Christian nationalism, 46%, almost half, say they would prefer the U.S. to be a nation made up of people belong to a wide variety of religions. What does that mean? How did these people not think of this when they were answering those initial 5 questions about Christian nationalism? There's an opportunity, and part of it, again, is about conversation, building bridges, not to the adherents necessarily, but to these sympathizers about what do they really understand about what's going on, about what they believe, about who they see Americans as. The skeptics and rejectors already understand our position. The last piece of good news, I feel that that is an opportunity. The other piece here is part of the reason they have grabbed this power in such a bold-faced move is they know they're in decline. They have turned so many people off by making religion about politics that evangelical Christianity in the U.S. is in steep decline. Christianity overall in the U.S. is in steep decline, and it's a little bit hard to see, but the graph on the right shows that in 1972, 90% of Americans identified as Christian compared to 64% in 2020. And if there is no further switching of denominations out of Christianity, in 2070, it's projected that only 54% of Americans will be Christian, but the odds that there will be no more switching is highly unlikely considering how much switching continues year over year. And most of it is switching out of religion into unaffiliation with religion. Doesn't mean they no longer believe in God or magic, not necessarily, but they are no longer part of an organized religious movement. And so evangelical Christians understand this is their moment to take power, potentially never give back power, to dramatically reshape America. And it's going to be bad. It's going to continue to be bad. But the piece that I want to hold on to with some of these numbers is they're not the majority. It may take time, but it will turn back around again. But I can't leave you with, happiness and sunshine and flowers and rainbows right now, because it is a tough time. So, if you want to get involved, we would love your involvement. Jews for Secular Democracy. Some of the key issues, we didn't even touch on immigration. Sometimes it's very clearly related to church-state separation, like when they try to ban a whole religion. They've gotten, again, a little bit more subtle now. Obviously, though, repro rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, secular education, these are really pillars of the work that we've been doing. And also the science denial that gets a lot of coverage by fundamentalist religion, when really what's driving it is, I think, economic greed. But it's all intertwined. To use religion and weaponize it, it's really what it is, to dramatically remove protections from people who want to make a positive difference in the world on climate change and so many of the other issues. So I'll stop there. I see that there has been some chat, but thank you for listening to that presentation. And as I read through this, maybe if somebody wants to unmute and ask a question, happy to do it. Happy to answer as best as I can. Frank?
Yeah, I'd like to offer a couple of points. The use of the word Christian has always been problematic, because what the right nationalists have managed to do is, in the past 30 years or so, they've managed to usurp the word for Christian. And so, and also the abortion movement, that really wasn't a fundamentalist Protestant idea, but it was Roman Catholic. And these white evangelicals, they kind of jumped on the Catholic vote because they knew that they could grow their allegiance from it. They didn't consider Catholics Christians. They didn't even consider Catholics white, especially if they came from Italy or Spain or Greece. They didn't consider Jews white either. When did we become white? Yeah. So the other thing too is that these evangelical Christians are end times. They have end times theology, which means that they believe the end of the world is imminent. Well, they've been believing that for 2,000 years, but they believe it now. And they believe that the only time that the Messiah become Christian, and he's going to come to Israel. So that is where you get the love of Israel for these people. They don't love Jews, they love Israel and the idea of Israel. And one thing that is really disturbing is that these evangelicals, they are disguising themselves as Jews. These Baptists are disguising themselves as Jews. Before they would, they would go out and proselytize and try to convert Jews. Now they don't do that. You have what you call Messianic Jews. And I think one of these Messianic Jews even gave a blessing to Trump. And what they do is they pose as Jews, and they use Jewish holidays and Jewish food, and they pretend they're Jewish, and some of them actually believe they are, and some of them are to not convert, but to make behavior. They're not converting them to be Christian. They consider themselves Messianic Jews or fulfilled Jews. And if you want to see how invasive they are, go to Amazon and click on Jewish Bible. and see what comes up. Half of the Bibles that come up are Messianic Bibles. So if a Jew doesn't understand that's what they're getting, or even Haggadah, you know, you want a Haggadah, go on Amazon, Haggadah. Sometimes you don't realize that it's a Jews for Jesus Haggadah, you know, so that's where they're getting people. And we have in Manhattan, there are 3 Messianic synagogues. One is right around the corner from where I live. It's actually the center for the Messianic movement in the United States. So, I know this is a big problem in Israel, you know, because these people are going to Israel and they dress like Haredi Jews, you know, with everything, and they are getting people to, you know, and so this is a problem. And then they get involved with these other Jewish organizations, and they pose as people who love Israel, who have a heart for Israel. They use the word a heart. I have a heart for Israel. I have a heart for this or that one. And so so those are a couple of things. But the idea that these Protestant, it would be better to call them Protestants and not Christians, because they don't consider Catholics as Christians. Catholics do.
Right.
And now what's happening is that people, young people, especially when they're getting together, they're really all confused now. The word Christian is very, you know, it's very understandable. And so I have it in my family. I have Catholic people in my family that now they call themselves Christians. One of my nephews married a young woman. I said, what religion are you? She said, Christian. I said, what kind of religion? I said, what kind of Christian? Are you Greek Orthodox? Are you Armenian Apostolic? Are you Presbyterian? Are you Episcopalian? She had no idea what I was talking about. So we're Christian, you know, and this feeds into what you're talking about, Paul.
Right. Yep. Totally. And it is disturbing. Another group that I do, since you bring it up, I want to say that there's another great group that we consider allies called Catholics for Choice. I briefly met their executive director and was shocked to learn something like 85% of American Catholics are pro-choice. So there is a huge divide between their leadership or clergy and the laity in American Catholicism. And so, yeah, there are differences. And you're right that white evangelicals, which is why I was showing those charts, is kind of leading the way. But then when you look at like who's on the Supreme Court, those are Catholics, but they're implementing like white Christian nationalist policy. And there was a merging, certainly around the abortion issue, to bring them together. And that provided both of them with an increasing political power when they knew that their bases were melting away, because people are so turned off by politics and the lack of like just religion and spirituality that they may have been looking for, which, by the way, I think also happens in the Jewish community. I certainly have friends who grew up with me in the conservative movement, and they're like, all the rabbi ever talked about was Israel and intermarriage, right? And why would I go for that? Because I'm looking for spirituality or whatever it is, you know? So I think politics and religion have always been problematic, but now it has really turned into power. So thank you for that. Pete, I see that there is a question in the chat by Steve Jonas about how can we use the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which he, you know, handily provides in the chat. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, right? So that's two-part clause right there. Establishment of religion means there is no state religion in America, and prohibiting the free exercise thereof means everyone should be able to practice religion as they see fit. But those two clauses have been in constant battle with each other since they were written and litigated against in the Supreme Court for at least 100 years or more, and has flipped over time. And now the Supreme Court, and this is my answer to why can't we use this more, because the Supreme Court doesn't believe it anymore. You know, the Supreme Court has been ruling in favor much more of free exercise, meaning, and of course it's only free exercise on behalf of Christian fundamentalism, to, for example, Coach Kennedy to have a prayer service right after the football game, and all of the technicalities, they bent over backwards to say that that was not coercive, as if players who play for that coach could simply opt out, right, and still be in favor of their high school football coach. It's absurd and disturbing, but unfortunately, the legal pathways to changing this are at least partially blocked. They don't always rule, you know, they're not consistently totally hard right wing. There have been some decisions that gave some glimmer of hope, but for the most part, it's an absolute crapshoot now to try to litigate our way out of this. So I feel like the path that might be stronger is simply legislative, as far as getting other people into office by mobilizing folks to understand what is happening here with Christian nationalism, white Christian nationalism, and how it hurts everybody, right? Not, you know, other than white Christian men, and them too, if we were to drill down on what it's going to do to America as a whole. But unfortunately, there are lots of different groups that voted against their interests, and then now they're going to be very surprised at some of the things that are going to come for them. Peter.
Hi, Paul. You packed a lot in, a real lot. But I want to address a couple of things from the beginning and maybe the end. So the first part you talked about, and this question may be easier than the end or vice versa. I'm not really sure. This is all very daunting, I admit. But when you said the three branches of government are heavily conservative, do we have any statistics, and I assume so, to square the numbers to who they're representing? Obviously not to the Supreme Court, but the Senate and the House. What are the numbers there regarding, let's call it the hardcore versus, in your statistics earlier? And the end question, if you can maybe combine it. So if we're trying to build bridges, which is a very lovely thought, and it may not be working, do we have to resort at a certain point, not just legislatively, but something more hardcore, much more, I don't want to say violent, but much more assertive, super assertive, to break through?
I don't think we're there yet, and I hope we don't get there, but I hear what you're saying. As far as like the breakdown of what percentage are hardcore or not, I don't have those numbers. It could be derived and it may exist out there, but I would argue it doesn't matter, because they all vote together because they are afraid and uncourageous and don't have political courage, except for maybe one or two. And luckily the House is so almost evenly split that we may only need 6 defectors from the GOP to vote against certain things, and we will see if that happens. But there's so much power in the executive branch and Supreme Court that he's able to write these executive orders, and we'll see. They're going to be challenged legally, but the Supreme Court is going to uphold a lot of them, right? So he's circumventing the Congress, but even if he goes through the Congress, the political penalties for Republicans who don't vote with all the rest of them, we've seen what happens. They lose their seat. I mean, it has already happened. They get punished politically, which means they have to be courageous enough. And we did see this the last time around with a number of GOP people who said, I'm out of here anyway, so at least I can be honest about what's actually happening. But for the most part, that doesn't happen. So what's actually in their heart doesn't matter if they vote for this agenda.
Even though it's about a third, they're still working off of a herd mentality or what they're hearing mentality. It's
the winner take all system where it's the two parties and you either vote with your party or and we saw and continue to see how vindictive Trump can be to individuals who cross him.
So it's about fear.
Of course, totally. If they're not already bought in to the belief in, life beginning at conception or all the other, magical thinking, then it's just about, I can't buck my party. I was put here by the people who voted for me, and they wanted me to vote in this way, but the reality is when you actually look at how Americans feel, most Americans want abortion legal. When abortion was on the ballot in even red states, people voted for legal abortion. It barely missed becoming a Florida state constitutional amendment by 2 percentage points, and only because they needed a 60% threshold to edit their constitution. So even in Florida, a majority of Floridians wanted legal abortion and couldn't get it because the threshold was not about majority. It had to be over 60%, and they came back close to it. When Americans are given an actual democratic choice on the issues, they choose reason, but they don't have that choice, and the undemocratic aspects of it, I think, are only going to get worse, I fear. I don't know that I'm seeing everything, so it may be easier for people to unmute and ask their question.
Can't believe we're shy, this group.
So this is Ellen Wyman. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Okay, hi. So this is, I know it's kind of rhetorical or existential, I don't know, but I went to a fundraiser a couple of years ago with Fetterman from Pennsylvania. And, it was fresh off the tail of Michelle Obama saying, when they go low, we go high. And yet he was being pummeled. We're all being pummeled, and the pummeling has gotten worse and worse below the belt, below the knees. And somehow or other, I just find it hard to hold to the Democrats' noble, or do we call it ignoble, stance of like, we don't lower ourselves like that. I mean, these people are cunning, and you can't just like stand there and watch it go by, or you're going to lose this chess game.
I hear you. I hear you. And it's really hard. And there are plenty of people who are using harsh language, but I think that the theory is you look at who's out there, you look at the demographics, you play the long game, and you realize that when history writes this all out, who is actually providing a vision of an inclusive, multiracial, multi-faith community, and who isn't. So I would argue that if anything, the Democrats and liberals in general have not articulated that vision nearly as well enough as they could have and should have been. And they get accused now, anyone who now at this point who's using the word woke is using it as a weapon against people who want to see a genuinely pluralistic, multi-faith, multiracial community. There is a lot of identity politics on all sides, but what I don't hear enough of, I think, from our side is, why is it a positive value? Why does it make us stronger to be multiracial, multi-faith, all-inclusive, LGBTQ inclusive? Why does that make us better and stronger and a more powerful country, right? They are now, why was it better to have a military that is diverse, right? It didn't make us weaker. It is a lot of nonsense on the right, but not a whole lot of vision being provided on the left that I would like to see more of.
But Paul, maybe that's my point. And the fact that we're not aggressive enough somehow, or cunning enough somehow to slice through, this incredible wall of misinformation and everything.
And the other thing I forgot to mention this when Frank spoke, but I wanted to, and you're reminding me, is I do think we are challenged on the left, or Democrats, with the growing number of the non-religious, right? The unaffiliated. Now, there's the unaffiliated are the fastest growing religious group in America. It doesn't mean they are atheist, agnostic, or secular, but it means they're unaffiliated with organized religion. And they overwhelmingly voted Democratic. And a lot of people are criticizing the Democrats for ceding religion to the right. And so now some Democrats are starting to talk more with more God language and starting to think that we lost because we're not
Yeah.
religious enough. And
No.
again, I feel like they're missing the point here, which is that we need better articulation of why we are a big tent that welcomes people of religion and people of no religion, and how we can work together. And that's another big pillar at Jews for Secular Democracy that I want to be working on this year, because I know firsthand that there are interfaith coalitions that welcome people of all religions, but then stop short at humanism or atheism, or the Satanic Temple, who does wonderful First Amendment work if you're unfamiliar with them, right? They need to be in that tent as well. And we need to be in dialogue and not in arguing about the religious piece, because it's irrelevant to the political piece. On the political piece, there's no daylight between what we believe about women's equality and LGBTQ equality and abortion access, and all of the points are completely in line. So who cares if they believe in the God of Spinoza, or they believe in the literal God of the Bible, or they don't believe in any God at all? How can we all be included in that coalition? And I have seen how the interfaith coalition organizing is weak or incapable of including us secular and atheists and agnostics. And that's a piece that I really want us to be working on, because to me, that's the way forward, is finding ways to build bridges and show a unified front. Because again, we're the majority and we can't seem to organize us in that way. Yeah, I see Louise.
Yeah. I have some thoughts about Christianity that I don't think we could really say publicly, but what's so great about Christianity? People sort of see it like synonymous with good, moral, kind. But, you know, Christianity to me is the religion of slavery in the United States. It's the religion where women aren't supposed to speak, where, you know, slaves are supposed to obey their masters. You're supposed to follow the leader and not question the leader. Like, what's so great about Christianity? But it's sort of like accepted that Christianity is synonymous with benign, kind, wonderful, whatever. And, you know, I sort of feel like, you know, when they go low, we go high. We can't really say those things, but I sort of feel like wanting the country to run on Christian values. What are those Christian values? Slavery? I mean,
Right.
what are they?
So look, I hear you. And obviously, you know, like the history of Christianity, if you drill down, can be horrifying. And yet for individuals, if it gives them comfort and they're not hurting anybody, then it gives them comfort. And so, you know, again, this is about tactics in some ways of, are we as, and believe me, because I have a foot in the atheist organizing movement, and there are lots of groups that are not nearly as big as, you know, they perhaps need to be to take these positions, who just want to see the eradication of religion, period. And I actually think humanity might be better off if there was no religion, right? The John Lennon song, which somehow still gets played at religious events. Imagine there's no religion. But that said, it's not going to happen in our lifetime. And people take comfort in their religion. And I'm not in the business of removing comfort from people. I just don't want it impacting my life. So I think that as hard as it is, we need to find some kind of inclusive balance. But I absolutely, and certainly from the Jewish perspective, the history of Christianity has been anything but kind to us. And, you know, or even just, you know, I you know, if you've ever visited the Vatican and you walk around and see the incredible riches, and then just kind of scratch the surface a little bit, like, how did all this get here? You know, it is the worst atrocities in some of the worst atrocities in human history, what happened in South America and the developing world around colonialism, all, so much of it following the cross, right? But that is, you know, I still feel like we can distinguish between religious fundamentalism and liberal religion. And that's the bridge that I think we are better off building, is to liberal religion, because otherwise we are split between non or anti-religious and liberal religion. And then fundamentalists, who are not the majority, win because we're split, right? So what I'm saying is the majority needs to
Sam
come
Harris
together.
disagrees with you. Sam Harris thinks that liberal religion gives a pass to the whole concept of religious belief.
And
And
I
as long as
get,
liberal religions believe in religion, then Islamists can create jihad and kill people and all this. So he doesn't. He
so
thinks that
that's
there's a problem in
fundamentalism.
being tolerant
Yeah,
of religion.
I know, and I disagree with Sam Harris. I understand it. I feel it often, but just strategically and tactically, I disagree with him on that.
I've got no tact.
Jillian?
You're muted, Jillian.
Thanks. I guess I want to say I'm a little uncomfortable just talking about Christianity in general, the same way I would feel hearing people talk about Judaism in general and lumping us together with the ultra Orthodox.
Exactly.
Just because, yeah, like you said before, for some people, it's the basic core values of Christianity that's grounding. Like somebody mentioned Jimmy Carter in the chat. I mean, he's a wonderful example. I mean, I've known Catholics who've been in congregations which are embracing of LGBTQ plus people and pro-choice, like you were saying, the Catholics for Choice. So I guess, yeah, I
appreciate that. No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
We have to be careful in terms of defining, like you said, the
Totally.
Christian nationalisms and the extremists, right?
Totally. And look, there is a huge rate of intermarriage in America. There are more intermarried households containing one Jewish spouse and one spouse of another religious background than there are households with two Jewish spouses, right? And so it's not them and us, it is our families. And we know that there are literally millions of supportive Christians or former Christians, lapsed Catholics who are our family and love us and would never say, oh, well, if you don't accept Christ, then you're going to hell. So you absolutely have to recognize the diversity within any of those religions. And, I totally also at times feel like the Sam Harrises of the world. And like, can't we just get rid of this, right? This magical thinking. Can't we just go with science? But it just isn't going to happen in our lifetimes. And people are looking for hope in ways that we can't provide them by saying, don't worry, you won't feel it when you're dead, right? Does that comfort you? Like, people want the comfort of religion. And as long as they do it without impacting on me, then I have to not only accept it, but advocate for them to be able to do that. Because I want to be able to do it in my way, and I don't want to have restrictions on my non-practice of religion, right? I don't want to be forced into practicing religion because that's what society is telling me to do. So I really do feel that it's a little bit complicated, but it's worth taking the time to differentiate and to articulate and explain to people what it is we're hoping for. And like I said, there's that middle group of people who maybe, and you may have encountered this. I went to school in the Midwest. I met people who have never met a Jew before, whose entire world were fellow Christians and didn't even really know that there are people who aren't Christian, right? But it doesn't mean that if once they learn that, they don't become sensitive to the fact that it's not all about them. There are other people in the world, and they can make the room for it for other people to express their viewpoints as well. So that's my hope, is that we can build those bridges to the folks who are moderate and who might kind of change where they are. Michael?
Yeah, I was wondering, Paul, how can we help? I mean, as individual members of the city congregation, how can we help take a stand against the tide of the red tide, or the tide of Christianity and Christian nationalism?
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that we do with Jews for Secular Democracy is advocacy. And so as a 501c3 nonprofit, we can do some lobbying, but it's very limited, and we're very careful not to. We're still trying to adhere to the laws that existed in normal times, right? Now, you've got preachers endorsing Trump from the pulpit, which is like theoretically not what's supposed to happen. We're still trying to maintain nonpartisanship and only focus on issues. But even on focusing on issues, you can advocate as individuals for the issues you care about. How many people here have ever had a conversation with their elected representative. Okay, right? And this is a pretty activist group of people. So one of the things that we do is help volunteers understand what is effective. So first of all, you should know they want to hear from you. They have a whole mechanism set up at every level of government to hear from their constituents because they want to represent you, because they want to get reelected. So the more you speak up and speak to the people who have the power to make the change or have the power to vote on these things, the better. And so one of the things that we do, and we'd be happy to do it, and we can do a training for either city congregation as a whole, or if there's a group, a social justice group or whatever that wants to learn how to effectively advocate to your elected official, whether it's state level, and there are state level issues in New York on church-state separation, or on the national level, I would be happy to help set that up so that you can be effective in articulating what you want your congresspeople to understand about who you are, about what you believe, especially if you're secular. They very rarely hear from secular people who are openly atheists. There are now 2 new members of Congress who are openly not religious. I don't have their names right in front of me, and I'm sorry that I don't. Up until this, literally this month, there was only Jared Huffman from Northern California, who was openly not religious. He called himself a humanist. There are now 2 more in Congress, which is exciting, but totally underrepresents non-religious Americans who are at least 10% or more. So letting our elected officials know that we are here and understanding how to do that in an effective way is something that we could absolutely help you do, or you don't need the help. Just find out how to contact your elected official on their website. They want to hear from you. You may be talking to their staffer and not to them directly, but it will get to them. They keep track of what people have communicated to them. So that's one way.
But with the idea of going through their offices and flunkies, I've had the experience it takes forever or not at all, and I give up. And what does it take to get through to them if they want to hear from you? But when you try and you go through this whole rigmarole, what do you have to stand naked in front of their office to get their attention? This is the frustrating thing a lot of people, I think, go through. Unless a very strongly crafted word or incident has to happen to get through to them.
We can help set up meetings for you if you've had challenges. I haven't experienced that. There's often usually on their website a form. I know the phones will be like a phone system to get you to the right staffer because they divide their staffers by the issues. But we've been able to get meetings. And the other thing you can think about is lobby days. So we haven't done one in New York State where we would send a whole group of people up to Albany, but I've done them in the Capitol building. And I'm going to do another one with the Secular Coalition for America, which SHJ is a member organization of, in the beginning of March. And we go to our elected officials, and I have been able to have meetings with the actual rep, but that's because SCA is doing the work for you. So we can set it up for you. We work with a great professional named Sarah Levin, who is very adept at navigating those things. It would be more effective if it was a group of people coming from a community who said, we want to have a meeting and express these opinions to you, so they know that, oh, this is organized. But even as an individual, they should be receptive. They should be able to have a meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Sybil, hi.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. Trump, I mean, I'm sort of amazed at how much he's done so quickly. And he's clearly so full of himself. And the things he's doing, I mean, people besides the immigrants who will and those who are forced to leave will be leaving people, they will have friends or family left behind who miss them. Lots of people, well-educated people who had power are losing their jobs. You know, it goes on. And will there be a tipping point? I mean, will he go too far, too much? Because at this point, I'm, also amazed that no one is saying no. No one is fighting back. We see where the tech titans are behind him, where all sorts of people are switching and everybody's afraid of him. But at some point, will too many people be hurt? And,
Yeah.
and will he fall?
It's really so the piece about him getting a lot done already is exactly what I was saying when I was talking about Project 2025. They were ready this time, right? They weren't ready the first time. They were ready this time. And that's a lot of what he's been signing, is this agenda that they had already ready to go. As far as people recognizing, so it is astounding, right? He just removed the cap on medication prices for Medicaid recipients. Like, how many Medicaid recipients voted for Trump? And now they're going to have hugely more expensive bills. But will they understand how that happened? Or will they blame somebody else? I think a big part of it is the American electorate and how educated they are about how these things even happen, or how aware they are. How much news do they even watch? We give so much credit to Fox News and the impact that they've had on our society, but their most watched show is only 5 million people out of the 350 million Americans. So I think the bigger issue is that folks just are so uninformed. They vote with their guts, and they won't even fully understand why what's happening has happened to them. But the people who do know, who are driven by greed, like these tech bros, I watched, because I'm a history buff and I got sucked into it. I was recently watching a really good 6-part documentary, I think on Netflix, about the rise of Nazism. And I'm never comfortable drawing exact parallels, because there aren't exact parallels. History is never exactly the same. But there was one thing that really stuck out, which is that when Hitler was rising to power, the old money, conservative, rich oligarchs in Germany felt like, okay, well, this guy is a buffoon, but he will let us control him. And they were more afraid of the radical left, which at that time was communist, because of the huge disparity of wealth in the Weimar Republic. So these old world industrialists made a deal with Hitler, thinking they'd be able to control him. And then he just, obviously, we know what happened after that. And I'm just thinking, the big money people are just always going to stay with the folks who are going to keep them in power. And so that's why, but I just don't understand how the little people in America like us, who voted for him, and then see who is all lined up behind him. He's a billionaire, they're billionaires, and folks think that's who has your interest in their heart. So I can't answer it, because I don't get it. I don't understand it. But I do think that they will get harmed, and then they will blame it on somebody else. And it's going to be really miserable when they do. And maybe it'll be us, and we'll, then we get to fight for real. I really hope not. I hope that we can find ways to show people the light. Susan.
Sorry, I was gonna make a comment about your comment about the media and about how much media these people consume. They may not all watch Fox, but a lot of them live in swaths of the country where not only is Fox News one of the few news channels, but if they watch news at all, they are on Sinclair-owned stations, which are also extremely right-wing. So they may not be watching Fox all the time, but they're not getting any other points of view except crazy conservative stuff.
Yeah.
And they are not not well educated in how the government works, because that stuff's not being taught in schools anymore. And they don't see, they believe what is fed to them. And whether it's fed to them by the newspaper, whether it's fed to them by Sinclair, whether it's fed to them by Fox, whether it's fed to them by watching the speech by Trump, they believe it. And it's sad. But particularly, I mean, I see it among members of my own family that live down south, that they believe it hook, line, and sinker. And they're also taught from very early age, if it has the letter D after its name, it's bad, don't ever vote for it.
Yeah,
So,
also going, Susan, your point about the education, that's something, I wonder if those surveys reflected anything about education, Paul?
There are other studies that show the education level of who votes for what. And yeah, I mean, Trump literally said, "I love the uneducated." I mean, that's a direct quote, and there's a reason why he said it, and it's depressing. And I see in the chat that now we're forced to root for Mitch McConnell. I mean, what has this world come to? But it is, you know, look, it's a very scary time. I'd like to kind of end on a positive note, which is how much I appreciate all of you and our community that we have in New York and around the country of humanistic Jews, of like-minded people. And look, I will tell you also, there are some folks, maybe not on this call, there are some folks in our community that voted for Trump and argue about it for whatever reasons that they have. And they will say it's part of their humanistic Jewish identity too. And I really struggle with that as well. But in some ways, we also have to find the humanity in people that we very strongly disagree with in some ways. I also think that there are others for whom we don't need to respect or engage with at all. And making those distinctions, right? And that's kind of what we were talking about with, like, is it Christianity as a whole, or can we just kind of single out Christian nationalism? I think we have to do that work, because if we start removing everybody, then we're isolated and in danger. I think we have to start thinking about who can we build bridges with, even if we disagree on key things. How can we express to them why it's so painful and worrisome, and so on. And so it's so much work to do. We have so many, you know, we've tried to narrow down what JFASD does to like 5 key pillars, but even one of them could keep us occupied full time. So it's a big challenge. There's a lot of work to do. But again, I really appreciate all of you and all that you do. And I hope that, you know, we can do more stuff together as a community around advocacy and education, you know, just finding the words for us to be able to articulate to other people why we are so worried and what our hopes are for a better society. Like, what does that look like? All of those things are works in progress that we can be doing together. So I thank you for listening and for coming tonight. And just, I hope we will be in conversation again soon, because there's so much work to do.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was great. That was a great talk.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Well, we can end, right? Because I got to run. I have friends downstairs waiting to drink heavily with me.
And enjoy
which I'm not saying is the solution, but
enjoy Florida.
Thank you. It's supposed to maybe hit